Assalamu alaikum. Thank you all for joining us on today's fireside chat session, focusing on navigating the GCC investment landscape. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mohammed Ibn Ali. I'm a part of the Hub 71 mission. I focus on the capital access ecosystem, so really connecting investors with our startup community and looking at creating certain programs and offerings to accelerate the capital ecosystems gaps. I'm excited to host today's session. We have a wonderful guest partner, close partner of Hub 71 from Golden Gate Ventures, Mr. Michael Lintz, who's a partner. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Michael, before we go into kind of the discussion, maybe just a quick intro of the great work you do at Golden Gate and why are you here?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be back. See old faces and a lot of new faces as well. So congrats to the new cohort. Looking forward to working with you guys in whichever capacity. Brief background. So my name is Michael. I'm a partner at Golden Gate Ventures. I've been with the firm for about 12 years now. I've lived in Singapore for about 11 years, and then I moved to Doha about a year ago. Our fund has about 5 funds under management, so 4 funds that focus on Asia, and we have 1 fund that focuses on the MENA region. I used to be in your shoes, so I'm a former operator myself. I used to run a data center, way before data centers were very cool. I built my business in the early 2000s, sold my company in 2007. Basically been investing ever since. But I was all over the place, was investing in the US and in Europe and a little bit in Asia. And my wife said, you have no idea what you're doing. You should join a venture capital fund. So I joined Golden Gate Ventures in 2013 and been with the firm ever since.
And what brings you to the GCC?
Ooh, quite a bit. Well, mainly you guys, of course. No, but basically we had a bit of an epiphany as a fund. So we've invested in just over 107 companies across 4 funds, and we've always had the ambition to build a global brand as a VC firm. I had spent about 9 years in and out of the region between Asia and here. So I told the team, like, if we are expanding, I think it makes most sense to expand to the GCC region. It has some similarity with what is happening in the Southeast Asia region as well. If you look at Singapore, Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, etc. So about 2 years ago, we said, you know what, we'll try out if it makes sense to open up a fund here, knowing that there are like a lot of amazing funds already, in the region and present. We wanted to try and do something different, something unique. And I think our presence in Asia sort of helped us build a bit of a different brand for the region. But it's still, and I just want to give this anecdote, it still wasn't easy though. So we've been doing this as a firm for like 14 years now. And building our MENA brand and building our fund here just felt like building a company. So this actually happened. So in October of 2023, my partner said, Mike, we see the expansion and we think it makes sense, but it means building a new team, building a new fund, fundraising again, and then doing this all over. And I was like, you know what, we'll give it a try. And we were kind of still figuring out the structure and stuff. So in December, I called my partners and said, hey guys, so my house in Singapore, that's gone. My family moved to a small place and I'm taking a plane to Doha. And they're like for like a week or so? Like, no, I packed my stuff, I'm gone. So we actually went to Doha and started from scratch. So we had to go fundraising, build the brand, structure the fund. But to be very honest, it's been a really amazing journey because I think what brought us here is partnerships. I'm not through the Hub 71 commercial, but I think without partnerships, it's very, very hard to sort of build a brand here. And we were very fortunate to be able to have these partnerships with the likes of you guys.
Very interesting. I think, only a few funds or GPs really started in the Global South and, now we're in the GCC and really rebuilding what they've built in the Global South. So maybe just to understand, what differences did you see between the Global South and, becoming a GCC VC?
Yeah, I'll start with the positive, and then I'll do both, the pros and the cons. I think what is one of the reasons why we wanted to build a brand here is the level of maturity of the founders. What we found was when we started back in Singapore in 2011, obviously a lot of first-time founders, making first-time founders mistakes, which is fine, but it makes it a bit harder to build like a portfolio of companies. What we noticed in the GCC was there were a lot of founders that have built something somewhere else and decided, actually, I'm going to take my experience and build something here, either for the region or from here, and I'll build something globally. And that was kind of really exciting. And that was a big difference because when you look at Southeast Asia in general, companies build something for Southeast Asia. So you'll find a company in Indonesia and they build something for Indonesia. You find a company in Malaysia, they build something for Malaysia and Singapore. And more companies here, although they are building for the region, they had a bit of a global ambition as well. So that was an interesting one. What was a bit not scary but difficult, and we'll talk about sort of capital formation as well, but there was so much capital in the region, and even coming from Asia, where we have the likes of big funds like GIC and Temasek, etc. The amount of sovereign wealth funds looking at venture globally, but also in the region, the amount of family offices, second, third generation, looking to invest in companies. So we were a bit taken aback by how much capital was chasing a few deals. So that was kind of harder to navigate, and that was very different than Southeast Asia, where you had a few pockets of capital. Here you have a lot of them. So that was a big difference for us. And I think the other thing is just understanding what makes sense from a marketing standpoint. So if you are investing in a company, let's say here in Abu Dhabi, like what is your next step? And everywhere that I went, it didn't matter if it was in Egypt, in Jordan, Dubai, or here, or in Qatar, Bahrain. Everyone said, we're going into Saudi. I was like, oh man, it's like, is everyone going into Saudi? Like, it means like Saudi is going to be very, very crowded. And what does Saudi look like in 10 years if you have like 70 of the same fintech companies and doing the same thing? So that was something we had to navigate, and that was different than investing in Southeast Asia.
So very interesting. I think I want to still stay on the investor's perspective, then I'll move into the startup's perspective, right? When you were fundraising for your fund, did you change the thesis compared to Singapore, sector or stage?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I have to give a little bit of background. So in Singapore, when we started, the majority of the companies were B2C companies. So we invested in a number of marketplaces, kind of similar to eBay. And because we invested in e-commerce and marketplaces, we had to invest in enablers for these companies. So you can think of last mile logistics, you can think of inventory management, you can think of payments. So if you look at our fund one and our fund two, it's a lot of consumer-facing companies, whether in healthcare, whether in fintech, whether in e-commerce. Our fund three and fund four are slightly more a split between B2C and B2B. But when I came here, I was like, oh man, there's a lot of B2B companies. So we had to shift a little bit, where we said the majority of our investments initially is going to be more on the B2B side, or it has to be a combination between B2B and B2C. And even take on enterprise as well. So we have made a few investments, not disclosed just yet, but we have made a few investments that are on the B2B enterprise side, which in Asia took a lot longer to kind of evolve. So it was a lot of B2C first, then B2B. Here we dove right into B2B and business to enterprise. That was one. I think in Asia, if you look since 2019 approximately, you'll see that companies in Singapore are looking more at the global market because they were forced to. There was so much competition that you had to your differentiating factor was, can you become global? So we basically said for our fund in the MENA region, we would like to see a percentage, around 40%, become global companies. Whether that happens, we'll see this over time. But I think the region is well positioned to potentially build a global company. So that was a change in looking at building a portfolio here than building a portfolio in Asia.
I think one thing to mention, and this is yesterday, we had a workshop with our latest cohort, and one of the GPs or one of the startups asked the GPs, what makes the GCC so special? And he mentioned saying it's one of the fastest growing emerging markets with a developed structure, right? And I don't think you find a lot of places like that, and that's why I think a lot of GPs are actually flying in to not just raise money here, but to build out their capabilities for the GCC. Maybe we can speak about on a startups level or a founders level, right? From their perspective, how do you see?
Can I add one small thing to what you mentioned? So I think what founders need to realize is you're really in a very unique position being here. I've been doing this, like overall, I've been investing for, oh my goodness, 20 years now, just over 20 years. I've made a lot of mistakes, but I've never seen anything like this. Like there is this level of momentum and a certain dynamic. So I was at Leap, sorry, yesterday and this morning, and like mature GPs from the US and Europe, they were like, man, this energy is something different. So I think if you are able to build a company now, and it doesn't matter where you come from, but if you are now here building a company, I truly believe you're in a unique position. There's a few things. So capital is one. It's important that capital is available in the market, and obviously it is available in different pockets. But it's also the sophistication of the capital is another one. But also the willingness to take risks, and that last part is something different. I've never seen this in any ecosystem in my life, and I've been doing this for quite a bit. So the level of risk the region is willing to take is really unique.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's more on developing the economies, right? So they're willing to take or write off certain amounts to build out that ecosystem. Going back into kind of the founders' perspective, right? You've worked now with multiple founders in the region. What advice would you give founders as they go for fundraising, right, to really get the right investors into their cap table?
Man, we couldn't go in a lot of different directions. I mean, where do I start? I think maybe the first thing is, like, I was telling this to a group of founders on Monday. We often get pitched by companies, and for some reason they almost kind of diminish their own story just to raise capital, and I get so frustrated. I'm telling everyone, like, without you guys, I have no job. That's how simple it is. So it's more of an equal partnership. And it's not so much like, oh, I'm raising capital from you, so you're at a different, level or a different pedestal. Like it's an equal partnership. So I think as a founder, what I typically like is when I'm in a pitch meeting and we're having a conversation, less so than being fully pitched. I always try to ask founders, like, do you have a question for me? Or what are you looking for in an investor? It is less so about, okay, Mike, just give me the money and that's it. So in investor conversations, treat your counterparty as equal. I think that is very important. Just being very authentic in your story. You're building something unique, or you're trying to build something unique, and this is hopefully your life journey, right? And which basically means that you can only fake it until so far. So having that level of authenticity is very important for me as well, for founders when they are fundraising. The third thing is just that's knowing about your business. Building a business is hard enough, and I know that investors act like they know everything. We don't know nothing. We learn from you guys. So it is very important that the moment we speak to a founder and we're having this dialogue and asking questions, I really want to get the feeling that they know 10 times more than we do. I think it's always very, very helpful. And this also, when it comes to building a company, and it doesn't matter if it's your second or third company or your first one, if there's something that you don't know, just say, Mike, I don't know. Let's figure this out. Oftentimes we talk about, how do you scale in different directions on the product side, market side, etc. And specifically in fundraising conversations, I mean, our capital is going to be stuck with you guys for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. I want you to give us an understanding, like, okay, I figured this out. This I still need to figure out, and I need your help there. So having that level of open conversation is very, very important.
So very interesting to see. I think what comes to my mind is, especially for founders, how does it look? The region, the GCC specifically, is very relationship driven, right? Less on transactionally driven, right? And how does it compare to the global south? From a founder's perspective, not just from a GP, right? Founders need to build relationships. It takes time, 2 3 years to really build that relationship and then eventually get a deployment. Do you see a difference between the global south and here?
Yes and no. I think there's I had a conversation earlier. I'm not sure if they're here with a few founders, and we were talking about FOMO. Because I was asking like, hey, when you guys want to close the round? They're like, no, we have time. We're not doing this FOMO stuff. So the FOMO thing is something similar. I've seen this everywhere: U.S., Europe, Asia, and sometimes here as well. Like, yeah, we're closing next week. We got a lead investor. It's now or never. Yeah, it doesn't work like this. But I would say, to your point, yeah, it's way more relationship driven. But I'm seeing a bit of change as well, though. I think there is a genuine interest to invest in good deals. Once there's a good deal on the table, it becomes very transactional very fast. The latest deal that we did was a company where they already had a lead investor. We looked at the docs, looked good, and we decided like super quick. And we've known the founder for about 6 months. We did ref checks with other VCs that were on the cap table, but that was less of building a relationship, and there's more about doing the transaction. But I'd say in general, the rounds take slightly longer here because there is more of this relationship part of it. Asia has been more transactional, I would say.
It's interesting because I think we're so used to seeing GPs from, let's say, the US come in here, right? And they're very transactional and they try to raise funds, and then they realize it's much more relationship driven, but even on a founder level, not just on an LP level, right? Kind of going into understanding, still on the startups strategies, what sectors would you think really work from a capital angle here, right? Where are GPs really deploying? I know you came here, you met a lot of co-investors, so you're seeing that trend. Where are all the GPs looking at this stage?
Yeah, it's getting, like, venture capital is not easy, and it's getting harder and harder. So I think the good GPs, and I like to see ourselves as a good GP, are looking more and more for companies that are building something that is harder to replicate. And because there is so much available out there in the market. We had this massive conversation with our other partners in the firm about AI agents, and we looked at we had about 15 deals in 1 week, and they were all AI agents. So not saying it's good or bad, but it's just like it's significant. If I go back 10 years, I would get one fintech deal in every 2 weeks. So the level of the amount of similar deals that you're getting has increased like tenfold easily. So it means that for us to be able to make a decent return on any investment, we need to find deals that are founders that are building something that is harder to replicate. So to give one example, stuff that we like is founders that are looking at traditional businesses, manufacturing, oil and gas, and are there ways that those businesses can be made more efficient, or are there parts that we can reinvent? Obviously, healthcare is a very big one. I think there's a moat there as well. But I think it's harder if someone says, "Hey, Mike, I'm building I don't know, payment gateway that is very generic." There's hundreds of those, so that's harder to say, "Okay, that makes a good investment." So we're taking more time to find deals for founders that are building something very, very impactful that is very hard to replicate. And I think, call me crazy, but I think hardware is coming back. I think hardware is coming back, and the reason I'll tell you why is the amount of companies we're seeing in the robotic space at this moment. We're now doing a deal. Oh, I didn't say this. We're looking at a deal that is in the quantum space that have a hardware component as well. And I'm seeing more and more companies that are now looking at, okay, the software side, we can we can build something unique, but it's easier to replicate. The hardware side is what makes us unique. So I see some more of the hardware coming back. Um, there's a lot of interest the next 1 or 2 years on the robotic side. I think that there's a bigger trend. So yeah, looking for companies that are building something that is harder to replicate is a big theme for us.
I think the biggest question for the region is stage, right? As you deploy, I don't know, pre-seed to Series A stage, how does it look on the growth stage, right? Do you, rely on international investors? Do you support portfolio companies, like from a value creation perspective? Is there any worries for down the line? How's it looking?
Yeah, we had if I go back to 2014, we had a big conference in Indonesia, and the conference was there's no capital after Series A, and mind you, this is
Is
11.
that the title?
Yeah, this is 11 years ago, and the issue was you had a bunch of seed investors, you had a bunch of Series A investors like us, but there was no Series B capital. So there was this big issue was like who's filling the Series B gap. What eventually happened was the Series A investors became Series B investors, and the seed investors became Series A investors. Guess what? No pre-seed capital. So you're always kind of solving for an issue. And I think more and more GPs and VCs are looking at how do we help our companies across multiple stages. So what we, for instance, do is once you get a check from us, you'll get the full force of our LPs as well. So they co-invest with us. They do later stage. They can be helpful with debt, to give an example. So I think it's harder for VCs to say, unless you're very specialized, to say, I'm just only going to do Series A or seed. I think you're going to be creeping towards doing Series B as well, and you might do some pre-seed as well. So we're flexible from a capital standpoint. And then we work with our partners to fill in the gaps, whether it is, debt structure, lending, we can be helpful with, or even later stage rounds as well.
Yeah, I think the GCC is a young ecosystem, right? 10 years old at max. But for more cities, 3 to 5 years old. When everything was launched, it was really focused to creating, funds, GPs that are focused on C to Series A stage, right? But now we're seeing a trend where a lot of them are looking on the growth side, either setting up their own growth fund or working with the kind of international investors to bring in the growth side. So hopefully they fill the gap soon and support that. But I think in general, the ecosystem is being developed from up to down, right? So you're seeing the IPO fund kind of to incentivize tech companies to hopefully list on the IPO markets, and that eventually creates the whole value chain within the investment landscape.
Yeah, I think what we oftentimes forget is, we get so excited once we close a deal, we close a seed round, big celebration, we close an A round, big celebration. But our industry doesn't exist if there is no exits. So it's very important that from an ecosystem standpoint, there is enough support to get companies to an IPO stage, or to get companies to be acquired, and help with sort of the structuring and bringing in big corporates from inside and outside the region. I think what we've seen in general over the past 10, 15 years, if you look at India, they've gone through booms and busts. Southeast Asia, there's a big question about kind of where are the exits, how are we going to facilitate those. Yeah, to your point, it's very important that there is enough capital available at the pre-IPO stage and help these companies get to listings as well.
One last question on the startup side, then we'll move on kind of the overall outlook. But from a founder's perspective, a lot of these founders are global founders calling the UAE or the region home. What's the balance between having international investors or GCC-based investors in their cap table? Is there pros and cons to have both, or?
Yeah, I would urge. I think early stage, you're fine in the region. I think that is totally fine. I think what you want to focus on is once you get post Series A, is also look for foreign capital. The biggest thing we've learned is, again, going back to Southeast Asia, the moment you have international capital, it doesn't matter if it's from US, Asia, or from Europe, it just kind of helps you position the company in a different way. So to give one example, we have a company in last mile logistics out of Singapore, but they have a large shareholder from France. This shareholder has been super helpful in bringing on strategic investors from other geographies into the company as well. And that network didn't come from us. It came from this specific investor. So having international capital at a later stage becomes more and more important.
Very interesting to see that. But do you see founders? I mean, a lot of the founders that come in here, as I mentioned, they're new to the region.
Yeah.
How important is it to have regional investors?
When you're here, it's crucial to me. Yeah, absolutely. Because for me, if any company that is here, it's like validation. I think it's similarly for us. If we are a fund that operates here and we wouldn't have local LPs or regional LPs in our fund, we would look different. Like, why would we take money from Michael when he can't even raise in the region? So I think for founders here, it's very, very helpful to have, I mean, you're here for a reason, right? So it's very helpful to have capital from here on your cap table. And they're going to be helpful with introductions, expanding to different geographies. So you have a different mindset, you have a different skill set on your cap table.
And I think one important reason is I think the founders need to localize, their products for the region, right? A lot of the regional GPs are investing into MENA-based founders, right? They don't want to invest in just a US, a South American startup. They want to invest on a MENA-based startup because that's their kind of KPIs where the LPs look at in some cases. So very important for a lot of you who are international founders that are coming here to really localize your products. Now maybe speaking about your overall outlook, right? What do you see the next 3 to 5 years happening in the GCC from a sector level, from a stage level? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the pace at which the region is maturing is, again, to my earlier point, it's just absolutely insane. It's at a breakneck speed. It's very impressive. My hope is that in the next, I think 5 to 7 years, we'll see more companies and more brands from the region expand globally. I think that is important for the longevity of our ecosystem. To have a few really big breakout companies that become global brands. I think that is one. The second one is founders from outside coming here and staying here. So building part of your business here in region is one. But then saying, okay, for the next 7 to 8 years, this is going to be part of our home base. I think is important as well. And I'm seeing it happen more and more. So that gets us really excited. I think to our earlier point around exits, it is, I cannot stress this enough. It is so important to see exits in the next 3 to 5 years, whether big or small.
Do you think we will see?
I'm cautiously confident because I've seen the downside of it as well. But it's really important for the region. Again, when we started our business, we had this was a funny anecdote. So when we started our company, we told all of our investors what's going to happen is the following. So we're going to invest in companies, and then we'll have like the likes of Meta and Google come to the region and buy out these companies. In Southeast Asia, Google bought one company, and it was kind of an acqui-hire, not really a big acquisition. The majority of the exits were regional corporates, so from Indonesia, South Korea, Japan, and China, buying out these companies. So that was kind of the big wave of exits in the first phase. But it was important because it was a proof point for our ecosystem. So I'm bullish that we're seeing something similar here, where we see local or regional conglomerates buying our startups, and hopefully more and more listings as well. So we're bullish.
We're going to move into kind of a Q&A soon, but maybe just one question, I think, just wearing the founder's hat. A lot of them are fundraising. How do they get access to Golden Gate, and how can they get an investment from Golden Gate?
So typically after these fireside chats, I go out the back door and then leave. No, just kidding.
Maybe we start with sector and stage.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll do the short commercial. So basically, if you're a founder, you're at between seed and Series B, you have a bit of a sense of product market fit. I would say decent traction. Doesn't have to be massive, but there has to be some traction. We don't have you need to hit like 1 million in ARR. We don't do that stuff. But yeah, a decent product market fit is very helpful. Some traction is helpful. Between C to B, is helpful. And then, typically it's, you hit me up. I'm very easy to find. Or one of my partners, just shoot me an email or WhatsApp, and then we'll take it from there. The one thing I would say though is this: everyone is asking, and I've been asked in the past week, I think maybe 19 times, is like, what is your thesis? The hard thing about VC is that, especially at the early stage, it's a massive bet on you as a founder. So if I tell you, like, my thesis is, I want to see 50% month-over-month growth, this amount of ARR, like product market fit has to be here, I can still invest in the wrong founder. Like, eventually, our most successful companies in our 15 years of investing have been founders we connect with, founders that are able to figure it out, and founders that call me at 2 a.m. in the morning and say, Mike, we have a big issue and I need you to come to the office right now, as opposed to not telling me anything. So it's about this like relationship of trust that you have over time. And you have to be a bit crazy as well. Like, who builds a company? Like, are you nuts? You have to be a little bit crazy and dedicate your life and your family's life and everything around it to build this business. And if you are confident that you're going to make it, take us on that journey.
Just one last question. I think from a lot of founders, I'm sure a lot of them have this kind of question in their mind. When they go fundraising, they mostly hear from GPs saying, "Go get a lead investor, and then we'll follow." Right? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So we obviously get the question as well. So our first 3 investments in the region, we led or co-led 2 of them. So I can tell publicly we're fine leading deals. Don't worry about it. And we'll let you know if we can't lead, because it could be that, okay, we like the founder, but there are some things that we are sort of a bit iffy about. We wouldn't want to directly lead, but may put together a syndicate. We get a lot of, okay, we have 6 follow investors, but no one wants to lead. I think as a founder, you have to kind of look in the mirror, like, why doesn't anyone want to lead my round? Like something must be off. But also just ask the investors, like, dude, why don't you want to lead? What is wrong with us that you don't want to lead? What makes you insecure about our company that you don't want to take a lead? I think the easiest thing, and it's a disservice from us to you as founders, is if we tell you, yeah, you'll figure out a lead and come back in 3 months. And once you have a lead, I'm still going to say no. It just makes no sense. I'll give one example, and it's not because it's us, but I see luckily more investors doing this. If you are unable to convince the VC to be a lead, but they are interested in investing in your company, just ask them, can you put together a syndicate? It doesn't always have to be like this amazing lead investor that kind of puts you on the pedestal and stuff. If you can put together a very decent syndicate of 4 or 5 investors on your cap table, and the syndicate agrees on the terms, and it becomes a collaborative round, I mean, that's fine as well. And then for your next round, you find a lead. I think it's more important to get the capital in the door as opposed to having this amazing lead investor.
Amazing. I'll move on to some Q&A, I guess, from the audience. I think I've bought out all the questions, but I'll leave it for the audience. So if anyone has questions, please you raise your hands and we'll...
So for additional context, we're a decentralized cloud startup that's finalizing our due diligence with Qatar's government and Doha Tech Ventures. And as part of that, we're also doing our due diligence. So we're wondering, how difficult is it for foreigners to penetrate the Qatari market when it comes to B2B deals?
Ooh, I didn't expect this.
Hot seat?
Yeah, hot seat. Oh my goodness.
I don't know.
No, I do know. That's the issue. It's doable. So let me start by this. You're talking to the right people. We know DTA really well. We spend quite a bit of time on their evenings, their pitch nights. So we know the team very well. It is definitely doable, but you have to put in some dedication to get it done. I think there is a lot of willingness, but we were talking about this earlier. the processes might not all be there. I think if you are in a good position with DTA, you have amazing amazing partners to kind of help you navigate through this ecosystem. And in all honesty, maybe after this, hit me up. I can probably help you as well.
In the time that you moved from Singapore to Chicago, have you had a lot of experience of rules changing abruptly and having to navigate the landscape for being a VC in Qatar?
From a VC standpoint, Qatar is one of the youngest ecosystems, I would say. I mean, there's only a handful of brands that run a VC firm. There's us, there's Rasmal, there's DTA, there's Alchemist. I think that's kind of it. So it's still very, very nascent. That means that not everything is, and of course QDB as well, not everything is in place for a venture ecosystem. But what I'm seeing is it's a very, very collaborative effort. So just to give an example, when there are issues in regulation, the group kind of comes together, talks about it, and speaks with the regulator. And the regulator is just very open in terms of kind of hearing our feedback. So one is for coming from Singapore, where Singapore was like, it's very smooth, very fast. Like Singapore treats their government almost like a company, and everyone acts like a CEO, and it makes things like very, very quick. That was definitely different here. But again, I think the willingness to make it work. I mean, we eventually made it work for ourselves as well. I think that was most important for us.
Investment landscape, but more maybe on the VC side. You'll be hearing a lot of talks about how AI is impacting the whole capital life cycle, right? More VCs, maybe private equities as well.
Yeah.
Maybe this question was asked a year ago, the answer would be it's just a hype. I think things are moving so fast now. So how do you see it impacting what you guys do in terms of all the way from the deal source, the DD, the transactions, the monetization as well? Does that mean more deals are going to happen? Is it going to become more competitive? How do you see it happening? Because things are really moving fast.
So I'd say on the competitive side, it's going to be way more competitive than today. I mean, my son is 9, my daughter is 13, and they have their own companies. So it is insane how fast things are going. So it's going to be harder for VCs to distinguish the different deals that they're seeing. I think that is one. We're very fortunate. So most of the partners, so we're all engineers and we're all computer scientists. We have a deep understanding of technology, and we still like it. So like I still geek out in the weekends, and my partners do as well. So that helps us get a very, very good understanding. So I'll give one example. In 2021, we had one EIR program within our firm, and we said, why don't you just fully geek out on a few AI problems and build a company around this? And we did this fully in-house, and the company now spun out, and they're kind of doing their own thing. I think as a VC, if you're purely kind of sitting back for financial returns, I think that's going to be very hard to run a VC firm. I think you have to be in the weeds, really kind of understand what is happening in the landscape, be in front of innovation, and take some risk. I don't think we are able to just sit back and hope the deals come to us. We have to be in market, understand what is happening, travel a lot, see a lot of founders, but it is going to be way more competitive than it is today. Yeah.
The way I look at it is I think there's going to be a shrinkage on enterprise, right? Because AI means a lot more less people needed in huge companies, a lot of complex things becoming easier, etc. So just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Do you think the enterprise will shrink and a lot more decentralized, smaller companies will go up? And so would you focus there more on platforms, or would you focus more on sort of these smaller, more nimble entities?
So the first thing I have to say is there is this big assumption that the majority of the enterprise is like innovating at a very quick speed, and that they are looking different in 1 year time or 2 years time. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for founders, is that only a very small percentage of enterprises are actually ready to innovate. The majority is still back in the typewriter days. And they have a very, very long way to go. And the reason we know this is that some of them have invested in our firm because they look for innovation. So for me, I think to an extent, yes, we're going to see a lot of consolidation happening, but I believe that 90% has not even started innovating yet. So we still have a long way ahead of us. My benchmark is always when I see a very big innovation and we're at the forefront of it, is I call the big corporations and I call the CEOs and I ask them what they're doing internally. And you'll be shocked how many folks are still using ChatGPT to figure out their vacation and nothing else. So I think there's still long ways to go. And again, that's what excites me because I see the massive opportunity for founders like yourself.
I also have a 9-year-old without giving the USB. What's the business that you're?
Yeah, so it's funny. My daughter is it's too long of a story, but I'll keep it short. So my daughter she's 13, but she designs her own fashion, and we basically said she's insanely creative. So we basically said you can only keep doing this if you are a trained fashion designer. So every single Saturday, she goes to to school in Qatar, and they do fashion design. So she can now design and make her own clothing. The deal with our kids is if you find something that you're passionate about, you have to make it a business. And I don't care how old you are, but you have to make it a business. So she's making a brooch for me for one of my jackets. She gets paid, of course, small money. But for me, it's important that once you find something that you're passionate about, learn to make it into a business.
You business from point how difficult to replicate this like beneficial.
Yeah.
So what's the definition of this criteria? How do you measure this complexity of replication?
So part of it is I guess a bit of our technical background. I can speak about one deal. Maybe that's a good example. So the satellite business is a massive business, and there's a lot of companies in the satellite space. When we had our first company pitch us a satellite strategy, it's a communication strategy between satellites and base stations. The first thing we did was, okay, how complex is this? Like how many companies are doing this? We found 6 companies globally, out of which 4 companies are big incumbents, only 2 were startups. That to me shows that maybe people see it, but are scared to build it because it's so difficult. So we try to do as much research as we can. The moment we get a pitch is how much is there out there, and then we do our own analysis technology-wise, how difficult it is to replicate.
Hi, Michael. I'm going to be greedy and I'm going to ask 2 questions.
Sure.
One venture question. How do you guys compete with local venture VC funds? And how do you find your interaction with the startup space? So that's one.
Yeah.
The second one, as you said, hardware is back and then you can expand on it. So I just want you to tell us about what you're thinking about hardware and how it's going.
In terms of how do we compete, I think we have our advantage of having a background in Asia and doing this for 14 years, having an extensive portfolio. So basically, if we invest in a company here, you don't get just Michael as a general partner, but you get our entire Singapore back office. You get access to all of our investors in those funds. You get access to our portfolio, which is 107 companies across 8 markets. I think that adds a lot of value. And I'll give one example. We had a deal that we closed with a company here in the region, and they were at the Web Summit in Portugal last year. So they had a booth, they had a stand, and they were speaking to a Portuguese VC, and they were chatting, and they were like, "Yeah, we're speaking with Golden Gate Ventures," and this VC is like, "How is this even possible?" So they started chatting. We co-invested with this Portuguese VC now 6 years ago in a deal in Portugal, which we brought to Singapore. That's the value that we bring. So we were able to put them together. They might be co-investing in this company as well. So that level of network globally, but specifically in Asia, is fairly unique. Yeah. And sorry, your second question? Hardware. Yes, thank you. So a few things. The reason why we are seeing the semiconductor space grow as insane as it has done and is still doing is there's just more hardware around us. And we're seeing more and more IoT devices. Like one company we've met, they do disaster detection, but they use the movement of water. So they use IoT devices for this. I spoke about the satellite company that we've invested in. Everything now revolves around metrics. So how do we get measurements from real physical devices, which means we need chipsets, we need more devices. So for me, in a connected world, we're just going to see more and more devices. That's why hardware is really picking up. And the level of deals that we're seeing, it used to be around 4 or 5% in our overall deal flow. Today, it's about 20% of our deal flow. So I'm very, very excited.
Michael, hi.
Oh, hi. Sorry.
What is the investor slash VC appetite in the region for investing in more traditional businesses? By traditional, I mean manufacturing, blue collar heavy, etc.
So the reason that it's hard, and the moment we think about an investment, we always think about, could this one deal return our entire fund? And unfortunately, that's the work that we have to do. When it becomes more and more asset heavy on the traditional business side, that just becomes harder. You can run an amazing business and grow it over time. It still doesn't return our fund. So that tends to become a bit more difficult.
Hi, thank you. So globally, venture has been struggling on returns the last several years, and that's a combination of a high risk-free rate and delayed exits with lack of M&A and IPO markets being closed. And it doesn't look like that's changing in the near term. I'm wondering, first, do you see that characteristic also here in the GCC? And second, have you done investments with venture studios that are tending to have faster exits?
So in terms of the trend, I think the global trend has also hit the region. Not as heavy though. It's been fairly robust last year. I think Saudi played a very big part in that. The US has been a bit harder. We're now seeing venture funds even consolidating. So emerging managers are joining other emerging managers because it's harder to raise a second fund because there haven't been any exits. I would say we're seeing a very early look that it's changing already. So we're seeing more interest in secondaries, to give an example, because the assumption is within the next 2 years we're going to see more exits again. There is more interest from traditional corporations to buy into or even acquire companies. So that's going to be picking up as well. I think it's still going to be a difficult year. I think 2025 is not going to be easy. There's a lot of liquidity in the market, but it's not going anywhere. So we're kind of sitting on their hands and waiting for whatever needs to happen to free the liquidity. I think overall, as a manager, what we do is diversify. So about 60% of our capital is in the region, and about 40% is global, with a nexus to the region across every stage. So we can do a Series D investment if it makes sense, and if they have something here in the region. To your venture studio question, it's actually a good question. So we do. In our MENA fund, we haven't done a venture studio deal just yet, but it's definitely on our horizon to work with venture studios. The venture studio model itself has gone through up and down as well. It was like the next biggest thing in 2019, 2020, then it kind of slowed down again. I feel it picking up again in the region. I think it's valuable. So to give an example, there are companies like, there are consulting companies, I'm gonna put it this way, that run very good venture studios where they really pick an actual issue, put together kind of a smart team, they build capability around it, and we like investing with those. There's one now in Canada that has a deal that they want to bring here. I think that makes it more interesting for us because you have a very experienced founding team, an actual issue that they're solving, but they're bringing it here to the region. So yeah, long answer, yes, we are very keen in working with venture studios.
Thank you.
Okay, we're running out of time. Thank you again all for joining us on today's session. Hope to see you guys on our next fireside chats in the next coming week. Thank you, Michael, again for joining us and supporting the Upside 2 ecosystem.
Thanks, and good luck to the new cohort.